Hi, I'm Matt Elkington. I lead PwC's Enterprise Risk Management practice, and I'm joined here today by Mark O'Sullivan, who leads our corporate reporting team. This is the latest in our series of videos on the updates to the 2014 UK Corporate Governance Code, and today we're going to be focused on the viability statement. Mark, the viability statement's obviously been attracting quite a lot of focus and originally controversy when it was included in the code. What are some of the key questions that are emerging around the viability statement that you're seeing within the clients that you're talking to?
There's no doubt that it's got all the attention. It's the number one question, which is sort of to effect what period should we be putting into our viability statement. But the reality is, and we saw this with some recent roundtables that we held, that whilst it was the number one question, we kind of addressed it relatively quickly, and actually the focus of the conversation turned very much to how would it be determined and what that might mean for disclosure.
So if it is the number one question though, what's the consensus that's emerging on the actual period?
You noticed I was ducking the issue to somewhat. I mean, I think the reality is that organisations at the moment have a number of different periods that they can choose from. You have arguably often companies have made some strategic statements that they put in the marketplace. They might have used some specific period for business planning, for impairment reviews. They might have a sustainability strategy out there. They might have a debt profile that would suggest a certain period. I think consensus is sort of merging around that rolling strategic planning period between 2 or 3 years with a possible extension. That seems to be where most people are landing on. The reality of that is that the board have to feel comfortable in making that statement. And part of the requirement is that the board has to talk about how they've come about determining that and what qualitative and quantitative assessments they've done to determine that period. And for many organisations, that level of rigour and comfort is driven by that strategic planning process.
So Mark, you mentioned before other messages. What are some of these other messages that are attracting attention?
Well, I think that the key message is around what are you going to disclose? And how does that information align with the other information you've already got out there? I think first and foremost, the viability statement refers to principal risks. So we would encourage companies to position their statement alongside their principal risks themselves. Then I think the challenges of integration are numerous. First and foremost, if you're going to state a period, make sure that you are sort of giving due consideration to the other periods that you've disclosed elsewhere in your report and arguably to the capital markets. So provide some rationale to why that period has been chosen. Secondly, give some consideration to how your strategic planning process aligns with your risk management process. Now that is an implementation issue as much as a disclosure, but also think about how you can better align your risk disclosure with your strategic messaging. And there's some leading companies out there that do that. And then finally, give some consideration to how your qualifications and assumptions, if there are any, align with your principal risks. We would argue that if your risk disclosure is specific and relevant and detailed, you wouldn't need to provide any more insight than you already do within your risk disclosure. And it's interesting to note that a company only last week from the real estate sector has published probably the first viability statement out there. And I think they have appropriately adopted many of those principles. They are very clear about why they've chosen the period. It's 5 years, so that's interesting in its own right. They've positioned that viability statement right next to the principal risks and uncertainties, and their risk disclosure is specific enough and detailed enough and aligned to their strategy to make those qualifications and assumptions relevant and understood.
Well, thank you very much. Clearly some thinking to be put into the process and the disclosure, as well as the integration of the different components that constitute the viability statement. For more information, please look at our website and the subsequent videos in this series. Thank you very much.